Hello, this is the Generally Bad Gamer, and today we're going to discuss the Tome of Champions 2021 for Warcry. Specifically, we're going to discuss the Underworld warbands of Order that have been added to the game. Now, for each of these warbands, I'm going to briefly talk about their ability, whether I like it or not, pros that I think the warband brings to the game, cons that I think the warband has, and then anything else that kind of comes to mind. First, we have Morgwaeth's Blade-Coven. Their ability, I think, is useful. It is a double where you pick another visible friendly fighter with the Blade-Coven's rune mark within 3 inches of the fighter, so 3 inches of the leader. That fighter then gets to make a bonus attack action. For a double, that's pretty useful. It does have the limitations of having to be within 3 inches of the leader, and the leader itself cannot use it because it is not visible to itself. This was a rules clarification that was made a while ago. Now, the pros of this Underworld Warband is that it is really just a good standard entry for new players. They buy this and they buy another box, and they'll have a warband to play with. However, beyond that, the cons are there's nothing new that this warband really brings to the table. They have a useful double, but other than that, there are no new model types. All the models in the warband cost more than their generic counterparts because they do have some improved stats. So overall, this doesn't really add anything new to that faction or the game overall. Next, we have the Chosen Axes. Their ability, I think, is okay. It is a double. A fighter can use this ability only if they're within 6 inches of a visible friendly leader, the leader of the Chosen Axes himself. Until the end of this fighter's activation, add 2 to the attack characteristics of attack actions made by this fighter. So, once again, the leader himself cannot use it because he's not visible to himself. His 3 grunts can use it. It is a good ability if they're close to him because it is a buffed up onslaught. So, but it does have limitations, and the model that would be best on, the leader himself, he can't use it. The pros, once again, it's another way for new players to get into the game easier by buying this and then buying maybe a box of Hearthguard or Volkite Berserkers. But overall, the cons are that this warband adds nothing new to Fire Slayers and doesn't help them with any of the issues that they currently have, which is their low speed and just inability to get anywhere to do damage. So overall, good for new players. The models themselves don't look too different from normal Fire Slayers, so they're not even models that are must-haves for current Fire Slayer players. Overall, eh. Next warband is Elathain's Soulraid. They have 2 abilities, and the first warband in the book from Underworlds that we see that has multiple abilities. Their first one is good. It's for their leader. Pick a visible enemy fighter within 3 inches of this fighter and roll a dice. On a 3+, that fighter cannot make move actions or disengage actions until the end of the battle round. This is the ability that I believe one of their leader types already has, but it is a good ability. So the fact that the leader from this warband has it is awesome. Their next ability, I really like that it got added to a model for the Deepkin because I think it's an interesting ability. It's one that already exists in the game for other factions. It is a triple, and it is called Riptide Harpoon, and it is on the Harpoon model there. This fighter makes a bonus attack action. After that attack action, the fighter targeted by that attack action makes a bonus move action directly towards this fighter, as if they were jumping a number of inches equal to the value of this ability. So it's a drag ability, which is really awesome. So this warband has some movement limiting shenanigans. They can make it so a model cannot move, and then they can also reposition an enemy model by dragging it. Pros is we see new model types in this warband. We have the guy with the harpoon with the drag ability, which we haven't seen. We have a fish. We have a He's not a thrall, he's a foot soldier with a shield and sword, and his stats are pretty good for what he is. And then we have the crab, which everybody just loves. So new model types and some interesting new additions from this warband. The con, the biggest con in my opinion, is that the coolest model, which is the crab, has the most disappointing stats of the lot. So he is actually the worst one stat-wise of the lot, which is really disappointing to me. Next, we have Thundrik's Profiteers. I will say right off the bat, I do not know much about the Caradron Overlords. I know so little that I can barely pronounce the name in the game of Warcry or in Age of Sigmar in general. So my opinions on this is very limited as far as how useful the opinion might be. The ability, however, for them seems good to me. It is a triple. A fighter can use this ability only if they are within 6 inches of a visible friendly leader of the warband itself, Bjorgen, and it is the third battle round or later. So it does have a battle round restriction on it. It has to be a third battle round or later. But then, if they meet those restrictions, this fighter can make a bonus attack action. It seems pretty good to me, as late game, this will allow the few models that you might have left to do attack actions with their awesome guns, sort of kind of like the volley gun that we see down the right hand corner there. So I like this ability. Like I said, I don't really know how this faction does overall in Warcry, so my opinion on this might not be the best. The pros, however, that I see are, once again, this is a standard good entry for new players with a pretty good late game ability. The cons are that your models from this, just like the models from most of the other Underworld warbands, are going to cost more than their generic counterparts because they have a few increased stats, typically hit points. The bigger downside to this is that the overlords in general saw a point increase because they have so much ranged attack, and ranged attack units overall saw a point increase with the new points addition. So I'm not sure how well an increase in points over generics that have already seen an increase in points will work out. Next, we have Myari's Purifiers. I think the ability on this leader is pretty sweet. It is a triple. Until the end of the battle round, subtract 1 from the attack characteristics to a minimum of 1 of attack actions made by enemy fighters while they are within 6 inches of this fighter. Now, this ability is already in the game for some other factions, but it is a nice addition to a faction that doesn't really have any big beaters. It'll make a lot of their models, their Blade Lords, their Wardens, just their normal foot soldiers, last a bit longer. Now, the big pro of Myari's is that the leader that has the triple also has the rune marks for the high sentinel ability. So this leader has one of the already best abilities in the Lumineth, and that it will give onslaught to every friendly model that will attack a specific enemy model, and it also has a defensive ability. So very versatile and some awesome options on that leader. Really, the biggest con I see here is that just the ranged model itself isn't really worth taking over the generic version. It doesn't have any interesting new abilities, to be honest, and it has a couple more hit points, but it's also more points in general. For range unit, I would say just take the generic ones. The other two units, the Rune Lord and the Ox Helmet guy with Malin, I don't remember what they're called. Their extra hit points that they get could be useful because they're going to be up in close combat. So the little bit of extra durability, I think, is more useful in them. Next, we have the Starblood Stalkers. They have 2 abilities. The first one I think is okay. It belongs to the chameleon skink that you see in the upper right corner. It is a double, It is a bonus move, which bonus moves are awesome, but it does have a pretty big restriction on it. This fighter can use this ability only if there are no visible enemy fighters within 12 inches of this fighter. This fighter makes a bonus move action. This really kind of depends on your terrain and the setup you get. If you have some heavier terrain where you can completely get out of line of sight of enemy models, you'll be able to use this more often. But if your terrain's more open and enemy battle groups have been set up closer to yours, you might not ever get the chance to use this ability because 12 inches is quite a bit of space that you have to be away from an enemy model. So it's an okay ability. I just don't think it's always going to get to be used. Now, the second ability belongs to the leader, and I think this ability is pretty good. It is a triple. Until the end of the battle round, add 1 to the move and toughness characteristics of friendly fighters while they are within 9 inches of this fighter. So it adds a point +1 to movement, which is awesome because it will allow your already quicker than normal skink units to move faster, and it'll up the speed of your Saurus units and your Saurus Guard units, which is always nice. And the range of 9 inches is also awesome because it'll allow him to use it move and then still keep friendlies within range. The toughness is okay. The best part about the toughness is going to be if you have any toughness 3 units like a couple of the skinks with shields or himself, because upping from toughness 3 to 4 is pretty okay. Any other toughness change, upping 2 to 3, upping 4 to 5, is significantly less okay, but it can still be useful since you're already getting that movement bonus. Now, the pros to the Starblood Stalkers is that they have 3 good models that come in this warband. The Chameleon, he gets the ability that sometimes will get used, sometimes won't get used, but he also, on his range attack, has a crit of 5, so when he crits, it's going to really hurt. He's also still only 80 points, so that's not bad for a ranged unit, especially with a crit of 5. The leader himself, because he has that ability, and he's also only 125 points, so he's a cheaper leader that you can add that has a good ability. And then the source that we see there on the lower right, he is actually quite a beefstick. For 190 points, you get a 28 hit point model with 5 toughness that also gets 4 attacks of strength 4 that do a base 2 crit 4 damage. He is pretty awesome as a beater. So if you need somebody who can get into it and dish it out and take hits, he's going to be a really awesome option. Next, we're going to start with the Stormcast Eternals, Steelheart's Champions. Their ability is a double, and it's fine. Until the end of the battle round, subtract 1 from the damage points allocated by each hit and critical hit to a minimum of 1 from attack actions that target this fighter. It's fine because they'll make them durable, make them more durable. But yeah, I mean, it makes pretty durable units already durable. Not horrible, but you have to weigh that against trying to kill stuff with the limited amount of units you already have. So the pros, they're more durable because of the ability, and they have slightly more hit points than their generic counterparts. However, the con is that their generic versions are already pretty durable because of higher toughness and 20 hit points, and are less points, and you're already talking about an elite warband. So all the points you have matter as far as trying to get bodies on the field. We then have the Farstriders, which the Farstriders have an absolutely amazing ability. It is a triple, and each friendly fighter with the Farstrider's rune mark within 6 inches of the leader, when they use this ability, can make a bonus move action. That is phenomenal. It makes them faster because they're all speed 4. So the fact that they can get a bonus move action, all 3 of them for a triple, if they're in the same battle group, is great. It's just all fantastic for repositioning, so they can make the most of attacks, and it's just an astounding ability. And that, of course, is the pro of them. The ability is amazing. It makes repositioning them excellent and something that you can do fairly easily. The cons are that they're more than their generic versions, but the ability I think honestly makes up for that con. Uh, I I think they are pretty close to auto include if you are running the Farstriders as one of your warbands. We then have Stormsire's Cursebreakers. The ability's fine. It's on Stormsire, the leader himself, and it's a triple. You pick an enemy within 9 inches and roll dice equal to the value of the ability. And for each 3 plus, allocate 3 damage points to that fighter. Like I said, it's fine. It's a way to, if you have a high value triple, 5 or a 6, to possibly put some good damage on an enemy fighter that's a bit of ways from you. So I could see possibly taking him as an option, though he is still pretty pricey, point wise, 235 points. So the pro is you have another leader with a ranged ability that can help you with finishing off a model, taking out a model, something like that. The cons are that there's no unit types, no new unit types that we see from this warband that's being added to this Chamber of Stormcast. And the mooks, the two henchmen, are very uninteresting and don't add anything new at all. So I am not convinced that they're worth taking over their generic counterparts. We move on to Sylvaneth now, and we have YIthari's Guardians. They have 2 abilities, with the first ability being kind of meh, in my opinion. It's a double, and you add 1 damage to crits. So until the end of this fighter's activation, add 1 to the damage points allocated by each critical hit from attack actions made by this fighter. It's a worst decapitating strike, I think, is the one that Corn Demons get. So it's meh. If you desperately need a little extra damage, you can use it, but it's probably not worth it over just using Onslaught if you're able to. The one unit that might be able to make some use of it is the ranged units from this warband, because it does seem to apply to their range attacks. So if you need a little extra damage and you're crit fishing with their range attacks anyway, it could work with them. It's meh. The other ability is a quad, and it's fine. Roll a dice for each visible enemy fighter within 6 inches of this fighter. On a 2 plus, allocate the number of damage points equal to the value of this ability to the fighter being rolled for. So it's another one of those abilities that will strike things around you. Instead of 3 inches like we see most of these abilities, it's 6 inches, and it doesn't auto do the damage to every enemy model within 6 inches. You have to roll 2 plus. So it's good. It's fine. It'll probably help you out in some instances, but it is a quad. The pros of this Underworlds warband is that there are interesting model options for Sylvaneth. So we're looking at cheaper foot soldiers that have some hitting power and a few more hit points. So we have the guy with the sword there. He gets 4 attacks and does 2 4 damage. He's got 12 hit points and he's 85 points. That's pretty nice for a cheap beater. We have the guy with the glaive in the upper left. He only has 2 attacks. He's strength 4, but he does 3 6 damage. He is 105 points. So I don't think he's quite as useful as a sword guy, but he's still a smaller beater option if you want one. And then we have the Archer, which is interesting because Sylvaneth, their only ranged units at the moment are a couple of the leaders with magic abilities, or the Hunters, which are over 200 points with the bow. I personally don't like the Hunters with the bow. That's a lot of points that you're putting in a ranged unit that, when engaged, really just doesn't get its points back. So a cheaper 85 points range unit that can take pot shots is pretty interesting. It's another option for Sylvaneth that they didn't have before. Finally, we have Skaeth's Wild Hunt. This is the second Sylvaneth warband and the final Order warband that was added from Underworlds. Their ability is good. Their ability is actually pretty sweet. It is a triple. Until the end of the battle round, add 1 to the attack characteristic of attack actions that have a range characteristic of 3 or less made by friendly fighters while they are within 6 inches of this fighter. So add +1 to attack while within 6 inches of the model that used it. Now the model that has this ability is that Hornblower, and he's 80 points. So you have a cheap model that has a pretty sweet buff that you can toss into the army. And that is fantastic. So the pros of this warband are these are all new models for Sylvaneth. So the aesthetic of them, what they are all new. Also, all these models are faster than the average Sylvaneth models. They all have at least a speed of 5. The only other Sylvaneth model that's a mook that has a speed of 5 is the Dryads. The leader has a speed of 8, but is mounted. The dog cat, the cat I guess it is, has a speed of 8. It is squishy, but it is also only 70 points. So they add some speed to the Sylvaneth warband, which is pretty awesome. Once again, they also add another cheap ranged option, so their bow user is also 80 points again. And then their other guy at the sword, their other mook with the sword that's in the upper right, for 70 points, you get 4 attacks at strength 3 with a 1/4 damage profile. That's not bad either. The biggest con of this warband is that the leader is the worst model play-wise of the bunch. 180 points, you only get 2 attacks, and this damage profile is only 2/5. And it's mounted, which, if you're playing normal Warcry, mounted means can't climb. In Catacombs, mounted isn't bad because of the bigger base size and the movement. But yeah, the con of this warband is that the leader is by far the most disappointing model play-wise. All right, that's the quick and dirty review of the Underworld factions from Order that were added to Warcry. There are other reviewers out there, so I recommend you look for them. The Salty Sea is one. Also, there is a Warcry Discord. If you look up the Warcry Reddit forums, you should be able to see a sticky post there that directs you to the Discord. Definitely go to the Discord if you want to discuss some of these changes or some of these rules or some of these units more. They are a pretty good bunch of people. All right, this is the Generally Bad Gamer signing off. Have a good one.